It's gotten us this far.
It's kind of fatter there.
Whose head is that?
Not that your head isn't fat. No, I didn't mean to insult you. You're so fat right now. I didn't mean that. Gonna take my horse to the old town road. Going to ride till I can't no more, which I believe is the song. Little Nas X.
I wouldn't be a fan of that song now.
Questions.
And answers? Or will we just do a questions one?
Questions and answers. Yeah, we'll ask the questions around here. I'll ask the questions. Gonna take my horse to the old town.
Whose horse is that?
Whose horse is that?
Whose horse is that?
Public chat. Adam Warren, hey.
Do you ever just want a Hilux like they do in Australia with the flatbed in the back?
Yeah, all the time.
I want one so bad.
Can everyone just confirm the audio is nice? Well, that's a weird way of saying it. Is that audio nice?
Is this audio nice?
Hi lads, how are you? Alvin, yo. Dan Martin, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you. Harshal the boss.
Harshal.
Well, lads, from Rano. Kicks9375 said, IE. Oh, Alan Warren said, can I get a quick fire review of co-worker S&C? Can I get a quick fire review of co-worker S&C opinions? I only drink coffee in 11 to 1400. Window, lactic acid doesn't affect strength training. Olympic gold medalist not on PEDs trying to get a clip. Quick fire review. Okay,
I'll take the first one.
Go on.
I only drink coffee 11 till 2. So there's people have problem with their sleep, right? Problems with their sleep. And I think in those cases, people limiting the intake of caffeine to a certain window is a good idea. I also think those people need to stop telling everybody else that you can't drink caffeine outside of that window.
Why are you looking at me?
I'm not. You don't drink coffee, full stop. But there seems to be this thing of like, it's like optimal or whatever. There's people will drink coffee at 11 o'clock at night and be absolutely fine. So definitely, if you have problems with your sleep, I would even say keep coffee to before 1 p.m. But if you don't have problems with your sleep, you probably don't need a specific window within which you can consume coffee.
The question here as well is, I suppose, is the fact that you might perceive it to be affecting your sleep, but it could be affecting it. So if you listen to the half-life of coffee, which are saying, I think it's about 12 hours. So saying if you drink a full cup at 12 o'clock, I think it was 12 hours. Maybe it's 8 hours.
I think it's 8.
8 hours. So you've got 3/4 of a cup or 2/3 of a cup by, say, 12 o'clock at night. But there genuinely is people. My wife is one of them. She could drink coffee at 8 and go to sleep, no problem later. I think you're kind of similar
And
to
your
that.
work wife is very similar.
Hey,
I'll drink coffee at any time of day.
Darren can get his allotted amount of sleep whatever time he goes to sleep. Like you could go to sleep at 2 and you'll get your sleep until 10 at night. Do you know what I mean?
If someone on the live stream was like, I'll give you €1,000 to fall asleep right now, I'd make that €1,000 in the next 5 minutes.
But you'd have to stay asleep for 8 hours.
Yeah, I'd do it.
Right. Lactic acid doesn't affect strength training. Lactic acid is a definitely very interesting one. And there's a lot of interesting biochemistry around lactic acid, which is worth reading if you have the time. But basically, lactic acid is important for energy production, basically. You want to put it that way. If you can't tolerate higher rep sets, and if we look at the way we do strength training, and if we look at the way we strength train for athletes, regardless if they're strength training athletes or they're athletes playing sports like field sports or combat sports or whatever it is, so at some point in their training, they're almost always going to be doing some kind of high volume work. And usually when we think of lactic acid, usually what we're talking about is lactic acid in our legs. Very rarely do we care too much about any kind of endurance threshold with our upper body. But in this scenario, we believe high volume work, again, to push back against all of the physique athletes on Instagram talking about 2 sets, fatigue, minimizing all this stuff. We really want to push volume at the right times. Now, it's not stupid volume. It's not volume for the sake of nothing. You know, we've pushed back against some of the small off programs throughout there, similar things like that, where it's just so much volume. it's just pointless. And it's almost certainly going to injure you, or it's not going to be sustainable. And it's not that we're not fans of training hard, of course, and we push back against that. So we like higher volume work. Whoever's trying to improve their strength, regardless they need a conditioning outcome, is the fact that you get more repetitions in at slightly lighter weights, but you're also pushing yourself into a fatigue position so you can practice technique under duress without having to get to heavier weights to practice this regress technique or this environment where technique is under poor conditions. So you can ensure quality of technique is in a scenario where you're challenging that, but you're not in a position yet where you don't have to go to those heavy weights, which was a very wordy way of putting that in some ways. Then you also are building general work capacity, so your ability to tolerate training. And when we have a lot of these put together, lactic acid is relative to the user. You know, for example, I've been doing a ton of zone 2, like very specifically zone 2 work over the last few months. I've been pushing that specifically over a longer time frame. Now you would think, or some schools might make the mistake of thinking that that improves that higher end threshold work. But then a couple of weeks ago, I added in 1K sprints and 5K sprints on the bike. It does not train that specific scenario. So in terms of lactic acid buffering, is it going to be the most fundamental aspect to be a great strength training athlete? No, you do not need to be. You technically could never go over sets of 3, and you could take 5 minutes, you could take 10 minutes between sets, but we're bigger fans, especially for the average person, of building that work capacity, and there's an ability to utilize and shuttle that lactic acid during sets become somewhat important. Absolutely. It's not fundamental. The threshold is relatively low. We know we're not going to be going in comparison to someone like Johans, the gentleman we saw there a couple of weeks ago on the news show, where he was doing an insane amount of sprinting uphill in skis. But for the average strength trainee, our tolerance on average is too low. This is why we talk about conditioning being so important for weightlifters and strength training athletes and powerlifters, is that you don't need a massive threshold of aerobic and anaerobic capacity and work capacity, but you need a good threshold, and strength training by itself, or the norms of which people usually do strength training, doesn't take that far enough. So lactic acid isn't going to be the be-all and end-all or a very important part or consideration for strength training, but general work capacity is. And as you improve general work capacity relative to most people's strength training standards, to tolerate that, those windows is going to be so low that it will improve. But it wouldn't be a thing where I would be, if I had a ton of money to dispose upon for sports science research, I don't think I'd be looking at, okay, let's look at lactic acid during strength training, and then specifically go about doing a randomized control trial with 400 people, probably students, and see how that would adjust.
Yeah. I think a lot of I know where this argument comes from, and I know where this thought process comes, and it's that energy system utilization during strength training. It's that anaerobic versus aerobic. But as Gerf was saying, almost nobody needs to think about that. Like, everybody is going to be better if they have better work capacity. Everybody is going to be better if they're more generally conditioned. And then they go and do their strength training as well. Like, lactic threshold training and really pushing that lactic threshold is obviously terrible, right? It feels really bad. It's horrendous. Some people love it because they're psychos. But I get it. A load of strength training people are like, oh, I really don't need to get to that acid bath kind of area, you know. But doing a small amount of it frequently will actually help you out a hell of a lot. The last thing then is Olympic gold medalists not on PEDs.
There has to be.
Yeah.
There has to
There
be.
has to be. And there has to be, there are sports where it's less common.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wait, taking drugs is less common, or winning medals on not on drugs is less common? Both.
Both.
Yeah.
Both.
Yeah.
Like, there are definitely sports out there with a lot of clean athletes in those sports.
Yeah.
There are also sports out there with very, 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 very few clean athletes at the point of winning the Olympics, right? You could pick a handful of both of those, and then all of the other sports exist somewhere in the middle of those two things. So certainly, you could say Olympic gold medalists not on PEDs. You could probably say,
I don't know. You should name a sport just in case.
well, you could say, right, Olympic trap shooting. it's very likely one of those gold medalists was not on PEDs, but there's also a culture of using PEDs in Olympic trap shooting.
Sure is.
They're not taking growth hormone and steroids, right?
You mightn't be.
But they're taking beta blockers, focus enhancers, all of these things. So it's very likely in a sport like that you do have clean gold medalists. It's just a lot less likely you have clean gold medalists in one of the big physical performance sports.
I think the big thing when we look at people using PEDs in sports is people love winning, regardless of the outcomes. And sometimes people who are not involved in elite sports will try and rationalize this from a point of view where they're a fan of the sport. And modern day powerlifting and, let's say, American weightlifting is a good situation here where the level of awards isn't massive. Being a popular IPF lifter and winning worlds mightn't give you a ton of rewards, or what you perceive to be, not you, Alan, but just people in general, mightn't perceive winning to be a big deal. But to these people, it's incredibly important. It's the most important thing to them. And people will say, for example, in powerlifting, they will say, well, there's tested powerlifting. You know, why would anyone want to take PEDs? There's no point. So therefore, the implication there is that they would just never take PEDs. Nobody is, the vast majority of lifters in the IPF winning have to be natural, because it would just be unfathomable to this person. And then what I don't get is then is people defending these people both in Olympic and non-Olympic sports, where they're like, there's no way they would do that. They don't need that. They work hard. Where people are imposing their own life view and their own morals on this person and their own subjective view of the world and how sport works. And they're saying there's no possible way this person, because I know them, or I know this type of person, or I really like this person. But the presence of testing in the IPF alone should let you indicate that someone will be willing to cheat. Someone will want to cheat. That's why the testing has to be there. If it was the case of you don't have to have testing because you just say it's an event where we don't take steroids, you wouldn't need testing if you believe that everyone would just obey the rules. So the level with which people will cheat, take PEDs in different sports at different levels it would blow your mind. You know that thing from a couple of decades ago, that interview where they talked about giving the gold medalists or medalist, or would you take this drug but you knew you'd die in 10 years if you took the drugs? It's crazy. If you talk to the people, you get to know the people who are team doctors and who do this consultation work for athletes, and we've been fortunate enough to know a few of them. The stories they tell you about athletes. When we're coaching athletes or we're getting near the high level, our current modus operandum over the last few years is we don't ask. It's monkey, see no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil, basically. So we don't ask. They don't tell. If someone volunteers it, that's fine, but we just never ask, because realistically, we don't know if someone's going to tell you the truth. It doesn't make a major difference for programming in the most part, because if you're seeing what someone can tolerate and structures and stuff, don't change that big a deal. But when you talk to these people who are the consultations for these sports, or you can even go read people like Gregory Trinkoff's book, for example. And there was this gentleman, they had this HPLC test, so they were testing some of the urine samples, and one of the throwers was taking so much stanazolol that he was leaving trace amounts on the system for the next samples and was giving false positives. So they had to do a full system wash on the HPLC in between samples after this particular thrower because he had so much stanazolol. People just do crazy things. And I think people underestimate. It's hard to fathom, because if you're very content and you're very relaxed, or you're enjoying your life and you work and you have your hobbies and all this, and we were talking about this beforehand, like, do athletes have big egos, or is it fair to call it confidence, or is it a combination of those? Once you see what some athletes are willing to do, it's just
Craziness.
crazy, the things they will do, the things they will get away with, the lengths some elite athletes will go it's so impressive, but it's also mental. So when you're thinking about Olympic sports and you're looking at Olympic or non-Olympic sports and people winning and stuff, you always just kind of have to color it with the fact that, most of these people are intense. Most of these people are crazy, and it's worth. Does that probably unfairly color our opinion sometimes, where we see that side of things And you're like, okay, it's probably not likely. Maybe. That's probably fair.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a fair statement to say that there has to be some Olympic gold medalists who don't take PEDs.
Oh, there definitely is, yeah.
Yeah.
J-Man at the bottom there with a super like.
I
Just go down to the bottom there. J.
$20.
Holy moly.
That'll buy a litre of diesel now in Ireland.
Okay.
That was unfair.
Do you have it?
Yes, yeah. Oh, is that it?
First, go up. Yeah, there you go.
This one?
Go up a little bit more.
Where is it? No, I've passed it, I'd say. But
Just above it is Evan Lee.
this one, is it? No? Where are we? The Riverside doesn't highlight it, you see.
God damn you, Riverside.
Okay, you read out the question. while I
Okay.
do this.
Evan Lee said, or sorry, not Evan Lee. J-Man says, first, thank you for bringing the shit talks back. You're welcome. Second, I'm a novice powerlifter. 220 back squat, 140 bench press, 240 deadlift.
Good
And I've been weightlifting for 3 months. 70 kilo snatch, 100 kilo clean and jerk. I'm 100 kilos body weight at 162 centimeters tall, aka fat, and want to know if I can go to 85 without halting weightlifting progress. You guys have probably heard this question 100 times, but I figured I'd throw it in again, lol. It's more about getting healthier, stroke more athletic. Being 100 kilos at 162 is not fun.
What's 162 in feet pinch?
I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to start off answering that.
5'6" or 5'5", is it?
53.78.
100
5'4".
kilos.
Okay,
Good man.
so Jay, first thing is, right, definitely, the idea of you dropping down and becoming healthier and more athletic is going to be really beneficial overall to everything. People are extremely worried, and particularly people in your case, right? You've really good strength numbers. They're legit squat, bench press, and deadlift numbers. People get really worried that they're going to lose all of that. And I know in your case, you're only 3 months into weightlifting, you're at 7,100, and you're worried that all of that work's kind of going to go away. The strength numbers are definitely going to go down. Do not worry about that in any way. Almost everything about your weightlifting is going to improve as you begin to lose that body mass, as you begin to shrink down, right? So firstly, let's just look here. Positions. When we're bigger, right? Bigger legs, bigger hips, bigger midline, getting down to the start position is more difficult. Now, when we talk about that, people oftentimes kind of put that, like, oh, it doesn't matter. You're just going to be able to squeeze into that position. Getting into that bottom position more freely, being able to maintain that position more easily, and then consistently hit that position rep on rep, set on set, session on session, makes a gigantic difference. Then your catch positions are better, your position at the knee is better, your overhead position is way, way better. Everything improves as you slowly start to shrink down, obviously to a point, but I think in your case, 85 kilos at 6'3", 6'4", or 5'3", or 5'4", is going to be a really good place to sit at. The second thing is, with the strength numbers, your strength numbers at the moment, or your historical strength numbers, are so far above 7,100 for snatch and clean and jerk that it really doesn't matter. You can maintain 80% of that back squat, 80% of that pull, 80% of that press, and you are going to be A-OK to put 30, 40, 45, 50 kilos onto your snatches and clean and jerks. It's going to be okay. Also, I think as people are losing the weight and they're dropping down, their strength numbers obviously take the dip, but that dip is somewhat temporary. So we dip down quite aggressively. That bottom of that dip isn't necessarily where you stay as you kind of maintain that body weight for a 6-month, 12-month, 24-month period afterwards. What happens is you get this really aggressive initial loss in strength. Your body is essentially relearning the positions, and you're struggling with the calorie deficit to make up sessions. You have this different biomechanical stacking that's going on, so it's more difficult to do the movements. But after a certain amount of time, after a few months of training at that new body weight, you're back to maintenance calories, so sessions and recovering from sessions is far more easy. Also, every single session, every single rep within those sessions, you become more and more accustomed to this new size of your body. And it just isn't that much of a big deal. Now, obviously, 100 to 88 is a quite big jump, right? 12% jump or drop in body mass, but it's not crazy, right? You're not dropping 50% of your total body mass. It will feel quite severe and it will take a lot of work to get there, but don't for 1 second think, oh, I'm going to delay doing this by another year or two because I want to get my weightlifting numbers up, or I want to get to 100, 120 for snatch and clean and jerk. Make that decision now is my recommendation. Make that weight drop nice and consistently over the course of 6 months, 12 months, and you'll be in a phenomenal position at the end of it.
I asked a couple of live streams ago about conditioning for Hyrox, and your advice it should be specific to competition durations. How do you go about making sure you maintain a big enough gas tank for the full Hyrox competition? So you need to treat this like someone would do a marathon, for example. So they're not going to go into every session and start training marathons. They're going to segment it. They're going to take specific portions of that to work on. Now, obviously, a Hyrox competition is a bit more complex because we've got different aspects to be training. So first of all, you want to start taking the smallest
Amount of EPO possible.
the biggest amount of EPO. So you want to take certain segments of that. Let's say, obviously, a fantastic time for Hyrox is an hour. You know, you're looking at an hour and 15, maybe an hour and a half. I don't know how good you are at the Hyrox events, but you need to start taking segments of that. Maybe it's some of the run and the carry. Maybe it's some of the ski erg and a run. And you start training these segments throughout the week, or you start training these segments in intervals. And then you start recording the data from those. You take the output from the heart rate monitor you're wearing, you take the output from the machines you're doing this on, and then you try and reduce the time between these intervals, for example, if you go about it that way. You try and increase the speed that you're doing within the time frame. You could also do a specific segment where you try and do the most output within this time frame. So let's say you take 15 minutes and then you take 2 stations on the Hyrox, and then you try and improve your output on those, or you try and do faster. So you've got a load of different options available to you here, but all you need to do is take certain segments of these, manageable segments that you can recover from, that you can get effective, meaningful training in, and then you either increase the intensity of these or increase the volume of these. And then as you're getting closer to the competition, you need to start broadening out these sections until you get closer to the full Hyrox event. Now, some people make the mistake of not doing a Hyrox until they get there, or they'll use lighter weights or shorter distances, or they'll run 500 meters instead of a kilometer. They'll use half the weights in a sled. Then they get to the competition and they're like, holy shit, this is not going as well as I thought, or my training times are suggesting. So as you get closer to the Hyrox competition, you need to get closer to the full event. And you'll know you're getting fitter if the times are improving on the segmented portions of training that you're doing all the way along. So if your heart rate is decreasing at the same output, or if your output is increasing in the time frame, or you're doing more intervals or more reps, let's say you pick a 15-minute section where you do the ski erg and 1K run, and you start off and you're doing 2 1K runs and 1 round of the ski erg, but let's say 6 weeks time you can do double that amount, then you know you're getting fitter. So as you get closer to the Hyrox event, then you need to start increasing the breadth of your sessions until you get closer to a full Hyrox. Now, you don't ever want to do your maximum pace. You don't want to do that race event where you go as fast as you can for the full event until you really get to the Hyrox competition. So you want to get very close to it, but you want to be efficient. You want to hold back just a little bit. You use the stuff where you go faster than the event in your segmented training, where you train beyond that capacity. So you go faster on your 1K runs, for example, not crazy amount, or you do a little bit more on your ski erg or your sleds or whatever. But you do need to be training that full event. So that's what we're talking about in terms of specific to the competition. Eventually there's a stage where you can't just segment these anymore. You do have to do full or half events, or as close to that event. The closer you get to the competition, the more of the event that you do. And then eventually you get to, let's say, 2 weeks out, or 1 week out, or 10 days out, you're doing a full Hyrox, you're feeling fitter, you're definitely in a better position than when you started the training block 10 weeks ago, or whatever that is. But then when you do that simulation Hyrox, or the full simulation Hyrox in your training, you want to push your boundaries, but you don't want to go flat out and do that full race pace there. You want to hold just a little bit back. Not too easy. You still want to give yourself a good training environment and a good representation, but you don't want to go and do, there's an analogy I want to use, but I'm not going to use it. You don't want to do that full event on that day at max pace. You want to hold it back just a small bit because you want to peak for that competition. It's actually, there's a bit more to programming for Hyrox events, to be fair.
Yeah. I also don't like the gas tank analogy.
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Why don't you like the gas tank analogy?
Well, it originally comes from people talk about certain CrossFit athletes having a phenomenal gas tank, right? And this idea that their gas tank was really good later on in workouts
Yes.
because they maintained a level of quality of movement, or they were able to maintain a pace as they went through it. And a lot of those things people are attributing to gas tank had actually got nothing to do with aerobic capacity at all. A lot.
Yeah.
They were way more efficient with their movements, or they were way better tactically at timing their workouts and understanding the pace they should go at. Or like there was just so many different things, and someone would be like, man, Froning's gas tank this year.
Yeah,
And you're
that's
like,
fair. I
you
can
didn't see that Froning actually took off at a different pace, or they did the movement slightly differently, or they broke up the reps slightly differently. And the gas tank thing, a lot of the time people are looking at people, particularly in Hyrox as well now that's come into it, they say that guy's a phenomenal gas tank. And you look at them running and you're like, no, that person is way better at running.
Yeah, the fitness is very specific.
Yeah.
I get what you're saying. Yeah, so like you could do marathon training and it's not going to make you specific for...
And you'd have the biggest gas tank in the world.
yeah, that's fair.
Francis, are you on, Francis?
You've got to tell us what happened during the 2024...
What was that?
No, we can't tell you. It's a secret. All agreements are off the table. I think he's just joking.
Oh, yeah.
Shed is looking class as well. Fair play there.
Shed's nearly there.
Yeah.
A few more little changes to make.
Cameron says hello, James.
Cameron Shackleford.
Oh, Zachary?
Zachary says, good athletes make bad coaches look good.
Yeah.
Any truth to this in your experience?
100%, yeah.
Oh my God, you should write it on the wall behind you.
Oh, without a doubt.
Lads, this is one of the biggest truisms of competitive sports.
Yeah, it's not the only ism in competitive sports.
No, it's there's a host of reasons for it.
Yeah.
What will tend to happen in a lot of individual sports is a really talented athlete comes along. That talented athlete gets a coach because that coach is nearby to them, or that coach is assigned to them. That coach will take that athlete to numerous competitions or through a career and do really well. Then more talented athletes come to that coach. Then that coach still uses that deeply flawed coaching mythology or whatever they're using. And then suddenly it becomes, oh my God, that person has actually got 10 or a dozen Olympic medals, or they've been to the last 4 Olympic Games in a row. And their training ideologies are absolutely off the wall.
Oh, it's crazy. You see a lot of it, no offense to track and field, but you see a ton of it in track and field. Especially when it comes to speed training, you'll just get these really quirky ideas. But speed training in any endeavor, so if it's from swimming, track and field, anything like that, people will be insane. So I definitely think just high-level athletes, okay, is definitely an indicator of your coaching ability. So if someone continually has high-level athletes, then it's definitely a symptom of someone potentially being a good coach. But what's far more impressive is if someone goes through 10 years of doing S&C for judo and they take 5,000 athletes relative to where they are through at all different levels and talents to a better position. That's what's really impressive as far as coaching. It's one of the reasons we don't talk a huge amount about the higher level athletes we work. Sometimes we'll use it as a little engagement thing where you're like, oh, this is like they helped someone like this, you know. But in reality, what we're talking about in those videos is actually what we've seen with, okay, it might be one elite rugby player that the hook is about or the videos talks about, but in reality it's the 4,999 other rugby players who might have done, who we've helped or interactive programs or whatever, what we're trying to talk about there. Because that's really where, when people who are less than perfect, that's when it becomes an indicator of how good you are at coaching. So that's why I wouldn't be super keen if someone just has a ton of high-level athletes. It's just not that big a deal. I mean, I'd make the argument that Ivan Nabajev wasn't a stupendous coach. He got the cream of the crop. He got people going through multiple layers of a system where you actually probably had those good coaches taking them through their junior level and their youth level, and then Ivan Nabajev brought them in there and, Okay, was he good at organizing a team and inspiring people? Yeah. Was he good at just giving people tons of drugs and making them go max out? He didn't care who won as long as somebody won, you know? So there's this idea that, okay, did he revolutionize some of training and sport-specific practice? Yeah, as a concept, that's fair. But he wasn't doing it out of the goodness of his heart, from what you can see. He was just trying to be honest, like, it confused Abadjiev, for example, to train weightlifting without PEDs. It just didn't make sense to him. Like, why would you do that? And there's a lot of cultures like that in weightlifting, for example. But not to disparage Abadjiev, of course. Like, they did some fantastic weightlifting. But the idea there is that you could look at that person and then be like, okay, then they must be a great coach. But you do see that a lot in different sports, not just in the S&C side of things, but also in the sport-specific aspect of things, where you just get so much talent that they make you look shiny and good, you know? They, like you're saying, good athletes make bad coaches look good. Yeah, there's definitely... And the more embedded a sport is, the more people kind of get invested in those methods, and the more popular a sport is, you know, where fans of the sport get really defensive of these methods. So if you talk about soccer recently, we had someone on the new Zlatan Ibrahimovic on the news show, whereas you get fans being like, that's the way everyone is doing it, so that has to be right, or that kind of system is present. So it is interesting. Yeah, soccer is a good example because there's so many talented athletes, probably more so than any other sport. And participation levels are probably the highest in soccer/football worldwide, that you're just going to get. There's so many countries with so many systems and so many people aspire to it, that you're just going to get the cream of the crop everywhere. And
it's particularly in those really high skill or else really high genetic sports.
Yeah.
You know, if you're a sprinter, you're born to be a sprinter. If you're a marathon runner, you are born to be it. Now, it's not that you're going to be good no matter what, but you certainly can't be an Olympic medalist if your genetic profile isn't correct.
It's hard to make sick sprinters slower. Like, you'd have to be trying to do something.
Yeah.
It'd be like looking at elite basketball and being like, they are the best people to help you get vertical jumps because they can all dunk, even though everyone is within 6 inches of touching the rim when they reach up, you know? So it's not, it definitely, this isn't us being, you know, lashing out here, where I was talking to Tim Riley about this the other day. You know, some of the comments in some of these videos, and I was like, I won't say specific ones so people can't go find it, but someone will make a very normal statement about S&C.
Yeah.
Maybe like, strength training is good. And then you just have these people who zone in and are like, what do you really mean by that? That's not necessarily the case. Where they look at, like, are you unwilling to understand the context with which he was talking about this, you know? And in my opinion, anyone who does that frequently, I just can't imagine your business or coaching is going very well.
No.
I just never feel the need to do it in a comment section. You know, if you're adding to the conversation or talking about it, that's fine. But when you're very clearly being a CUNT in the comments, I always think that's really interesting.
The only time I comment on things that aren't my friends is when people are talking about my friends' businesses.
Oh, yeah.
And I'll be like, they're amazing. You should definitely do that.
Yeah.
This is amazing. You should definitely try that. That's the only time. Marcus Boxall. Do you have that there?
I sure do.
Marcus says, I'm doing the RTA 2 and the box step-ups feel more like cardio than hypertrophy. I feel like I have a decent level of cardio, in brackets, I play rugby. Do I have bad conditioning, or is this the point of them? Both. So it's not necessarily that you have bad conditioning. The high rep box step-ups are there to gain a little bit of work capacity, to do a little bit of single leg hypertrophy, to get a little bit of glute activation on those single leg movements. But also, it's just a very different working demand than what you'd get playing rugby. Like, rugby is repeated sprint intervals with some local muscular endurance. These are purely local muscular endurance. So I wouldn't be worried saying you've really bad conditioning. I wouldn't be immediately running out saying you have to go and do a lot of conditioning work right now because you're bait after some box step-ups. It's just a very different thing. It's a very different demand. A lot of people, I will say, find some of those to be quite high in terms of volume and do get fatigued from them. But it's also, like, if you're in this case, right, and you're doing the RTA 2, and you find something like this that's clearly a deficit for you, right? If everything else is going quite well, and you have this clear deficit that's way more difficult than everything else to do, it's great. Like, you're in the ideal position. You've found the missing ingredient. You've found the weaker area that you need to kind of focus on. And it's perfect because every time you do them, even if the session is very difficult, you know that you're working on one of your weakest aspects. Like the worst thing you ever want to do is get to a training cycle and every single thing in that training cycle go perfectly, because they're probably not pushing any of those areas particularly hard.
Thanks for updating this training space. I'm very happy with it actually. It's great.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be
Just a few
it'll
acoustic
be
panels
great. Yeah.
and a few more plates. Harshal the boss says, "Bro, I am skinny fat novice. How should I train to build best strength and size gains in my novice phase?" So the first thing I want you to do here, if you're skinny fat, you have got to start tracking calories. I don't want you to adjust calories. I don't want you to increase or decrease them or think about anything like that. Don't go changing your eating habits as soon as you start tracking them. Just find the number it takes to keep your weight on the scales the same number. Now, don't start listening to anyone about main gaining and how you don't need to do anything and you can just main gain and you'll get to an unbelievable body composition in 20 kilos time if you just keep training.
They're lying to you.
They're lying to you. It doesn't happen in reality. What you need to do, first of all, track your calories right now. You need to see exactly how much you're eating. Don't change your food habits. If you ate every Saturday, if you eat 4 burgers at 2 p.m., this Saturday again, you go in and you do the same thing because you're just trying to get accurate data on where you are right now and get an accurate representation. So for the next 2 weeks, track it on something, put exactly how much you're putting into your food, weigh what you're eating, weigh your snacks. If you eat a packet of biscuits before you make your dinner, put it in the log. Track everything here. This is the first thing. You cannot out-train a poor body composition. You can if you start doing 8 hours on the bike every day and you start training, you start taking PEDs and stuff like that. But that's not the case here. So you have got to zone in on nutrition and you have to start tracking calories first and foremost. I know you can do it without tracking calories, and I know some people are like, oh, but what if it makes you neurotic and stuff? I actually heard a great analogy. Someone talked about not tracking calories would be like not tracking your finances. Like, don't you worry that's going to make you neurotic when looking at what you're spending, for example. Oh, you looked at how much that cost? That's the same thing.
Yeah.
Just, you have to, if you're skinny fat, you have to start tracking calories. Now, I know I just ragged on main gaining there a second ago, but the first thing I actually want you to do is maintain your weight for the next period of time and start training on a legitimate training block, a good training block. I'd obviously recommend the Seek a Strength app. I'd recommend you do something like the powerlifting program on the app, or do actually skinny fat, novice, beginner strength, male beginner strength, assume you're a male, whichever, male or female, strength, beginner, basic strength on the app, and keep your body weight the exact same for the full training block, and then see what happens to your body composition. So run that. That'll be 4 days per week. And then you want to do some conditioning twice a week, some specific conditioning twice a week. So I want you to start sitting on a stationary bike or a rower or a ski erg or whatever you enjoy, and just do that for about 15 minutes. And then every month add 5 minutes to that, but super casual pace. Now, the reason I was giving you about main gaining is that this isn't something that's going to work forever for the long term. But if you're a skinny fat novice, there's a possibility that you can recomposition for a period of time. But you can't do that unless you're actually tracking where you are nutrition-wise. So you want to look at your nutrition, you want to see how much fat you're eating on average, you want to see how many carbs you're eating, and then you want to see how much protein you're eating. Protein has definitely swung back in the other direction, which I think I'm in agreement with, is that it doesn't need to be as high as you think it needs to be. Probably somewhere around 0.7 to 0.8 grams per pound of body weight is definitely more than adequate. You can probably do less if you really want to. You could if you want to go 0.6. Then you want to start leveraging carbohydrates, having enough healthy fats in your diet that you feel good and your bloods come back up like that. But you want to just maintain this body weight, the same amount of calories, and see what happens over the course of a training block and see how this adjusts your body composition. If your body composition hasn't improved by the end of the training block, then you'll need to start cutting some body fat. Now, it's not ideal, but it depends how bad the situation you are in currently. You might be very under-muscled and you might have a lot of extra fat. It kind of depends. If you're in a position where, you know, you're not super skinny in terms of the skinny portions and you're not super fat, then you could probably maintain for another training block and see an improvement again in body composition. But the thing to note there is what I was talking about. You're not going to be able to get through this kind of maintenance of calories all the way to the end. But you need to get some training block with some verifiable information that's consistent and that's an honest representation of what you're eating and what you're training, and then see what this does. Because there is a chance you could build some muscle and lose body fat during 1 or 2 more training blocks if you're consistent with your nutrition here and you maintain the right calories. There might come a point where you'll have to cut the body fat first and then slowly increase the calories over time. But just give it 1 or 2 blocks initially and see how that does with honest tracking and consistent training and see where that takes you.
Up next, we have Rano.
Which podcast, YouTube channel similar to yours would you recommend?
My first one I'm going to say is Blaine McConnell. In terms of, people used to always ask us about like our training vlogs and stuff. I love watching Blaine's training vlogs. I like them. There's no faff, there's no fluff. It's just good, honest to God, training hard. And I really enjoy watching that. I don't watch a lot of S&C content or anything like that anymore, but I'll still watch Blaine stuff because I just like seeing people training really hard. Besides that, for me, it's all sports. So it's rugby podcasts, Gaelic football podcasts, general sports podcasts, but I don't ingest a lot of S&C content anymore.
I'm looking at my YouTube homepage here, and to be honest, it's mostly politics and food pages and geopolitics and history is really what I'm giving you.
I'd say mine is 99% guns and hunting, and then a little bit of other stuff.
Mashups like Carly Rae Jepsen and Whitney Houston mashups and things like that is very frequent on mine. Pum, pum, pum.
Right. Up next we have
Great question.
Andy Hits. Best exercises to improve vertical. Do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, we need to do a video on this, and I have the thing in my head. So the best exercise to improve your vertical are one of the best things we find in terms of, if you had to condense this down, to minimize the number of exercises you're using, full depth, as upright as possible squats, whatever that means for you, with a consistent back angle. So for some people this will be like this, some people this will be like this, but a deep squat that allows you to maintain a consistent back angle, usually with weightlifting shoes on, is going to be one of the more important aspects of that. Now, if you stick with strength training exercises, add in some single leg work here. What single leg work you use, it's up to you. We like Bulgarian split squats or front foot raised split squats, or we like box step ups. Depending on which one allows you to load enough weight, challenge yourself in a constrained pattern that allow you to increase the weight or increase the volume where it makes sense. So we're doing a lot of lower body work. And then adding in probably some hip hinge glute specific work. So RDLs from low to knee, stiff-legged deadlifts from low blocks, or if you're very mobile and you've got good range of motion, you could do deficits, stiff-legged deadlifts, for example. So lower body training, very important. Then obviously you want to be training the upper body to support the RDLs and squats, for example. Then when we're looking at specific jump exercises, so obviously if we're trying to improve our vertical, we want both the strength and the speed work. You want to take a selection of exercises that, one, make the jumping harder. So this might be something like depth jumps, or temporarily harder. So something that is below your current best vertical. So this constraint probably will have a lot of eccentric forces. So this might be depth jumps are probably a good example. Then you want something in your training that makes you jump higher than your vertical jump. Now this could be any number of things. You could use something like low box or parallel seated box jumps, or seated jumps, I should say, where you just sit and attempt to do a maximum vertical jump. Some people will do a depth jump, and as they get higher on the height they're jumping off of, will actually exceed their best vertical jump. So it's worth noting there for you. Then you want something, again, that makes it easier. So for example, seated box jumps for me, I can do maybe 2 inches higher, or seated on a box jump, just to be specific, not jumping to a box, can be very useful. Or you might need to use something like assisted jumps. So you're doing pogo hops with a resisted band where you're pulling yourself up. So you just need something that goes beyond your ability to jump. Then you want something that makes it a little bit harder. And then obviously you want something in your training that is the vertical jump. So you need to practice the vertical jump routinely. And then you need to include some kind of jumping that is very low impact, that allows some pretty good repetitions. So a personal favorite of ours is the straight-legged landing box jump. This is one that increases your intent. So jumping is all about maximum voluntary contraction, that going fucking hard as possible, as fast as possible. And learning this skill is very important. So obviously we need the strength there, but then we need that force pool there. But when you're going jumping, then you need to practice using this pool of force or strength really quickly. And so something like the straight-legged box jump has very low eccentric forces, or just low impact on landing. So it's very repeatable. It doesn't take a lot out of you. And what it does, when you're doing it correctly, it forces you, if you're constraining the landing properly, it forces you to do it correctly, and it forces you to contract really fast. So when you're doing those, a lot of times people just do not have that kind of pop onto the box or that step. Sometimes people have to regress this back to a 20-kilo place. They're so bad at that intent. So something that is easy on your body that allows you to practice this, something that practices the vertical jump you're doing, whatever constraint you're putting on the vertical jump, something that gets you stronger, of course, single leg lower body, hip hinging, of course, very, very important. And then a jump that makes things harder at the right times. You just need to be careful with the things that make it harder, because a lot of times these will have higher eccentric forces. So like the depth jump is a good example, and one we very much enjoy using. You don't want to run this for too many weeks consecutively in a row, because it does get very fatiguing. It can be hard in the joints. People's quality technique can be quite poor with this. So you just need to be smart with that in your training. And then the golden rule of speed training and vertical jump work is, if it's getting slow, stop the session. Just, let's say your best vertical jump is 25 inches. You're coming in for a day where you're just practicing vertical jumps or counter movement jumps or something like that. And you're in a position where you're doing 20 and you're like, holy shit, this is terrible. Just stop. There is no benefit to those sessions. They're just fatiguing you more. You're not practicing good technique. You're not practicing the thing you want to do, which is aggressively and fast contracting of your muscles to get up high in the air. So that's really important. But do not discount the strength training work. Do not discount it. It's so useful for vertical jump. The closer you get to 2.5 times body weight and beyond to infinity is going to have returns on your ability to jump, assuming you don't increase your body weight drastically. So, okay, if you increase your body weight by 15 kilos and your squat goes up, your jump probably isn't going to be as efficient because you're heavier. So at a similar body weight is important there, but most people don't need to worry about increasing the body weight for most part. And I think that's, you know what? Oh, God, you go first, because I'm just making some color commentary here.
I'm going to put a very, very strong comment out there. And I'm 100% weighing in behind this. Most people are very, very bad at jumping because they cannot contract maximally. This idea that for jumping, it's about getting to your peak, and it's about really nice tapers in training, and it's about optimizing all these things. Most people do a little bit of strength training and get way better at jumping because they firstly learn to actually contract hard. They've never contracted hard in their entire lives. You ask some people to jump off the floor and it's like a wet paper bag being blown around by the wind, right? Strength training helps so much with that. And then the second thing is getting those contractions happen as fast as possible. And I think people make it so complicated. Like, think of all the jump stuff we've ingested over the years. People talking about all these progression streams. People do strength training and they get better at jumping. People get better at strength training and they get better at jumping. And it's because those contractions are so much harder and they happen so much faster. And you just cannot discount how important that is. Most people I've coached who are bad at jumping are not bad at jumping because of maybe they're 40 kilos overweight and that doesn't help. That's one thing. They're not bad at jumping because their jump technique is necessarily bad. Maybe their jump technique is terrible. But generally speaking, the people who are bad at jumping because they cannot contract maximally. And when they do contract maximally, it takes them so long to generate any amount of force at all.
The most interesting thing about the vertical jump stuff, and it's come out more, I think, it's always going on, but I'm seeing a bit more recently, is the inaccuracy of all of the methods for measuring vertical jump. They're all inaccurate. Like from the reach tests, jump mats, force plates, any of the like infrared style ones. Like the variance and the amount extra you get from person to person, the technique uses. Like you'll have someone who's basically doing a 25-inch vertical jump and they're getting like 34 inches on whatever piece of equipment they use. Like the variance is massive, which is so.
And I actually think that void is so big and so noticeable because compared to the gold standard, the variance is so gigantic, you know? Like we can do a DEXA, or you can get someone who's really good and do 4 other measures of body fat percentage, and they'll get somewhere close to it. They will for visceral fat, or not for non-visceral fat, for subcutaneous fat. They'll get pretty close, right?
They're stabbing you with the calipers.
But with the vertical jump, unless you're on a force plate, all other methods are the distance between piezoelectric crystals in a force plate, measuring your takeoff force. The distance between that and everything else is so vastly gigantic.
But even the force plate is prone to issues, you know, the numbers you're getting on those, I think.
Yeah, I think force plate's really good.
Yeah.
And then everything else is very inconsistent. But the other thing is like,
Yeah.
that's only for absolute measurement. You really just need consistent measurement from time A to time B to time C. But it is, it is. The problem with a force plate then is it's 20 grand.
Yeah, and it's hard to access them. But
Yeah.
you see a lot. There's a specific jump mat or similar jump mats which give some crazy variance on those, and they're used widely, especially in the States. You see it, and you see people making claims about their athletes jumping this much. You're like, that doesn't look like another.
And in many times they just get better at using the mat.
Yeah.
They just pull their little toes up at the end of the jump for a split second longer.
Or they like bend their knees before they land. So
Yeah.
Like a lot of those are just time of flight.
Yeah.
Like the real, I suppose, some kind of similar to like the linear transducer on a barbell is tying something to your hip and having the exact distance displaced would probably be.
But those, you get loads different then because people do that tuck, you know?
Yeah. You'd have to imagine, I know there is some camera software that uses it.
I did a 3D study of where it was a subject on it, you know? And you get the skins on and all your markers.
That have to be the most
Force
accurate.
plate's still more accurate.
Still more accurate?
Yeah. Because it's just a trajectory thing, you know?
Yeah.
All you need is like your takeoff, the amount of force going into the ground at takeoff, the amount of mass that's on the plate, and then it's just a trajectory calculation.
Yeah.
So it is like...
I'd imagine a combination of force plate plus...
And your 3D renderings.
Would be real gold
Or
standard.
3D analysis, yeah.
There is a lot of bullshittery around vertical jumps. Now, the important thing for your own training is consistent measurement, and is it improving relative to where you are at? Here's Sam, who does all the timestamps.
Sam and Evan Lee as well, 2 OGs.
May Pachushka says, what do you think of weighted box step-ups for athletic training?
I think weighted box step-ups are really beneficial for athletic training in the way where they allow us to go through a really good range of motion. We can also alter that range of motion quite easily by increasing the height of the box, or maybe even putting a few plates on the ground in front of the box to make it slightly less high. They also allow us to control that range really, really well. So when we look at certain single leg movements, right, and I'm thinking about Bulgarian split squats as one example here, there is a really good way of doing a Bulgarian split squat, and then there's a really bullshitty way where you basically sit your ass onto your heel and you're not getting what you think you're getting from it. But you can load it up really heavy, right? You could have a double bodyweight Bulgarian split squat and you mightn't be getting that great a stimulus from it. What I really like in the weighted box step-ups, we have 3 or 4 things we're looking for. Obviously, tracking of the knee. I actually like maintenance of that slight amount of extension in the upper back as if we were doing a squat. And then we want consistent tempo on the eccentric and on the concentric. So as I'm stepping down, I want it to be nice and controlled. As I'm standing back up, I want it to be nice and controlled. I don't want scooting that second leg onto the box and then kind of squatting myself up there. With very, very simple coaching cues and things that athletes can watch for and feel themselves doing, you can get someone training really effectively through a really good range, and they're very, very easy to weight. You just get them holding on to something in each hand. I really like the single leg step or box step ups for that. Are they the be all and end all? No. Will they ever replace high bar back squatting? Absolutely not. But I think in terms of unilateral lower body exercises, they're really, really good. They're also, take this with a grain of salt, they're also in a ecologically valid range of motion. You're doing something that a lot of people will have to do in their sports or as part of their athletic endeavors. So I like them for a host of reasons.
How would you build up to a max lift at the end of a cycle in terms of weight? Currently sitting at 94, 117 will be maxing out next week. So I think most people just increase their dosages towards the end of the cycle.
I think so. You kind of sprinkle in some extras then at the end.
But Broderick is saying athletes or track and fields decrease them so they're more athletic.
Not in weightlifting though. Come on.
Wait,
now.
is he talking about maxing out? So
He's saying 94, 117.
no, we're joking.
What jumps would you take if you were going for 94, 117?
100. Nah. So the big thing with snatching is the closer you get to the max, the smaller jumps you should take within reason. So you want to get close to that maximum. So here, if we're saying 94 is our current max, I'd like to see 92, 96, for example. And then maybe 96, 98, or 96, maybe 100 if you're feeling spicy, if the milligrams are high enough, obviously. And then in the clean and jerk, you kind of want to conserve yourself a little bit more within the confines of making sure that the jump isn't so big that your technique shits the bed. So snatching, it will shit the bed if you go too big, so smaller jumps are really important. Clean and jerk is, if you're a big, strong boy, if you're a bit of a horse, you could go 110, 120, for example.
And you're already super warm from your snatches.
Yeah, so the clean and jerk is a little bit open to, you could do 115, 120, no problem. I don't go 110, 120, that's a bad idea, but you could easily do 105, 115, 120. You know, you have to play the clean and jerk a little bit more by ear because it is important to conserve yourself. Definitely, let's put a constraint on it, no more than 5 kilos attempts or jumps, let's say, within the 90% range. But snatches, please take the smaller jumps for sure. Clean and jerks, you know, the thing with a clean and jerk is if it's there, it's there. If it's not, it's not. Assuming your technique is staying consistent. A snatch is, you can take 10 attempts at a snatch and get it on the 11th. The first time I snatched 110, I think I took 14 attempts, which is obviously stupid.
I took an unholy amount of attempts at 110. Remember up in CSP?
Great. Did you make it?
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 110 is that weight that happens. Clean and jerk, however, sometimes the clean and jerk is just there and it's on. So you can be a little bit more loose with the clean and jerk because you want to keep the PB fairies going. So snatch, definitely small jumps. Clean and jerk, moderate jumps, but you kind of have to go a little rrr. Thoughts on squat flexion budget? So I think I know what you're talking about. I think a post recently. This is basically just, is spinal flexion issue under load, you know? My answer to this, right, is...
It's not that you can have a little bit of bump wink and it's okay in a squat. I actually need to look this up. Continue.
So Darren and I talk a lot about, we're talking about this recently on one of our podcasts, where if you're not an expert on a subject, you probably shouldn't be throwing your speculation out there too much, right? Or you should refrain from giving your own opinion in some ways, right? So this is kind of in the realm of that. Or well, we were talking more about removing your ego from scenarios and you're learning from other people is really valuable because it allows you to progress faster if you assume that the person that's helping you is correct, because you're more statistically likely to get more right answers when that person is helping you. So we specifically don't talk about injury stuff too much because there's a whole lot to it and there's better people out there who can help you. Strength training, performance, building muscle, all that good stuff. We're your guys and that's why you're here. But when it comes to something like this falls into a bit of a gray area where the experts don't agree. And I have a lot of respect for certain people on both sides who don't agree with this. So obviously I have great respect for Aaron. He's a great guy. It's very helpful to us. But there's other people who agree with him here, who I have respect for. But there's also people who make a good argument who I have also have respect for on the other side. So when it comes to this, I'm not fully convinced either way. Probably the answer I can definitely give you, and I can give you that we would take at Seeker Strength here, is that, first of all, as a lifter, it's always up to you what decisions you're making for yourself. Like you are the lifter. If you're not happy with something, you're not comfortable and you don't want to do it, we're happy to facilitate that, right? Because some of these are long-term questions. Now, our opinion on this is most of the movements that we're doing in the gym are better with less spinal flexion or maintaining a certain amount of flexion or ensuring that flexion doesn't increase during a lift. For example, the deadlift is probably the best example here, where if someone is doing a heavy deadlift, moving into more spinal flexion as you pull, specifically lower back, is going to make it harder to extend your hips. And as a result, is usually a worse position. We don't coach it like that. And really, when you get down to brass tacks with any of the best deadlifters or any of the great coaches, they are not looking for lower back flexion. Upper back flexion is a little bit of a different story. You probably want that natural curvature in your upper back. In general, seems to be quite good for the deadlift, and that's how we'll coach it. Could it be the Squat University aren't and similar are wrong, and that there is an unlimited budget here, or well, it falls within the same confines of any other limb in that we can build up tolerance within reason, and then if we don't exceed the force tolerance in the positions, then it might be totally fine. We just look at this where does it make sense for performance? And obviously, if it hurts right now, we're not going to keep doing it. So if someone comes deadlifting or squatting and they have a ton of butt wink or their back flexes a lot and it hurts, we're obviously going to not do that. We're going to try and build up some kind of tolerance and have better quality technique. But when it comes to, is this a problem long term? I would say we're kind of, the currently way we approach it is that less flexion is going to happen when we go about training the way we're doing it. We don't subscribe to the idea that everyone needs Jefferson curls or you need to progressively low Jefferson curls. We don't really use those. Is some amount of flexion in the back, squatting and deadlifting and movement fine? Yeah. Then we're happy to allow some realm of that, but it usually doesn't lend itself to the most powerful positions. So I suppose you could say incidentally, we don't end up with athletes going into a lot of flexion or lower back positions. But I think we're as equally ready for someone to come out with comprehensive research, biopsies, results on this, randomized controlled studies, whatever, and be like, oh, look, there's a very clear relationship between a huge amount of flexion and lower back injuries later in life. But at the same time, we're also in a position where someone could come out and be like, yeah, there's no conclusive answer that you can definitely tolerate a lot of training like this in certain positions. So that's kind of our opinion on that. I think we're a bit more, we don't have to worry about it right now because the way we're going about our training, the way we're coaching technique doesn't allow for a ton of flexion in that. Like if you're trying to deadlift more, squat more, whatever, any movement more, it's rare that more flexion, I can't think of one right now, where more flexion is beneficial, upper or lower back for the most part. So we can continue without being concerned about this because our current methods doesn't really incur a crossover where this is a major concern. Is it going to happen on some heavier weights or whatever? Yeah. And if it's not a major concern, it doesn't cause an issue, then we're not too bothered. But again, I think we're kind of just waiting to see in regards to a conclusive answer with this would be my opinion. Both sides make a very good argument, I think, here. And both sides have some compelling arguments backed by research. And both sides, from what I see, is coming from people who we have a lot of respect for in terms of their positions and they're on both sides. So it's kind of a wait and see. It's probably something that's not a great answer right now. But there is a compelling argument on both of them. I get where people are coming from in terms of you're fear mongering or you're going to make people neurotic. Do we see some people who are very neurotic about this? For example, when we open up the coach chat, is every so often someone send in a squat that's perfect and they're like, I'm really worried about the butt wink. And you're like, there's no butt wink here.
Yeah.
Or they'll send in a deadlift and be like really worried about the lower back flexion and there'll be a zero amount of increased lower back flexion when they go to deadlift, you know? So can people become too neurotic? Yes. Do I think that's a good reason not to provide people a good training information? No, I don't think not putting out honest information and realistically what people do is a good way of educating people. Ignorance isn't bliss for people, and not talking about something just because someone might become neurotic about certain things. We do not subscribe to that, where people are like, you're just making people stress about something. Well, no, if it's a relevant, important thing to talk about in training, then you should talk about it. Is it going to be interpreted? Well, look, in some ways it's buyer beware. You have to facilitate it yourself and be smart with your own training. But yeah, I'm definitely, I suppose, waiting to see if there's more of this comes of anything. It's not a problem for right now. It doesn't pose an urgent issue for us when we're coaching people.
It mainly doesn't cause an issue because when I look at a lift, I have exactly in my mind if there's too much flexion or extension going on.
Yeah.
In my opinion, overextension is just as damaging as flexing in the back, whether it's during the squats or during the deadlifts or during overhead presses or anything like that. The problem comes where you kind of have to just see it. Like what I was talking about here, with people becoming super neurotic, a lot of the time they're being super neurotic because of a perceived feeling, right? They feel like they're losing lower back, or they're losing that lower back extension. They feel like they're losing position. They feel like they're flexing at certain points in the lift. If you can't visually see it, in my mind,
Yeah.
it doesn't exist. It's like as they're refereeing race walking, unless you can visually see it with the human eye, it doesn't exist and you shouldn't worry about it. If I can see it going on, in my mind, like every single day, there'll be 5 people at Buttwink in the chat. And every single day I'll say it to someone. And it might be someone with a 250 kilo back squat and they're squatting 100 kilos for some reps at the start of a training cycle. I'll still see it. Like it's still something that they shouldn't be doing. And it's still something that I want them to fix before they move on. But in terms of like, if you're asking this, Cully, for your own reference, right? And if you're on more of the neurotic side of things where you're probably a bit more worried about it than not worried, I would say if it's visually apparent in a video, so let's take mid-back flexion and extension. If it's visually apparent or lower back in a video of you doing a back squat, I think you should immediately fix it. I think you should work on the things you need to work on, whether that's increasing the amount of bracing, whether you just need to make yourself aware of it and actually concentrate on it, whether it's some mobility or some weakness that you need to go away and fix and do it. But if it's not immediately apparent in a video, if it's something where like you're like, oh, maybe the t-shirt is covering it up a little bit, that's the kind of flexion budget that in my brain, I'm like, oh, that's not a concern.
You know, obviously we're not afraid of injuring ourselves, as if anyone who's watching the channel for a long time will know, we're not afraid of performance or training getting hurt. But at the same time, to maybe add to that argument of a flexion budget, there's not an infinite recovery capacity or adaptation capacity to any joint, no matter what you're doing, you know, within a normal human limits of whatever you're doing, right? So if you're making the argument that your lower back can adapt to everything and it's just you need to get used to it, most of the people that I know who've hurt their backs do physical labor. I've done tons of physical labor, more than I ever want to do. I don't want to do any physical labor, but unfortunately it's been present throughout my life, right? So these people are doing the same movement every day, and that's when they're hurting their backs. They're hurting their backs in what would be a lot of flex position, right? So anyone telling you, oh, they're confident that you can adapt to everything, I think are also, if you think Squat University is full of shit here, I think you're also full of shit if you think there's an infinite adaptation capacity here. Because if you've ever done a day's work, if you've worked on a farm, if you've worked in construction, if you've worked with mechanics, like I worked in mechanics for a lot, I grew up on a farm, lifting things with a rounded back in those awkward positions feels terrible. And this is where those people that I know in real life who've hurt their backs, and these are the people who are in positions where their lower back is in pain, and they spent their life lifting in those same positions, those 20, 30, 40 years.
Since they were children.
Since they were children, lifting in these, okay, let's not call them terrible positions. Let's call them lots of flexion in their back, rounded positions. There's something going on there. There's clearly something present there. Otherwise, that argument would be if it's a imposed adaptations to, or what is it? What's the
specific
imposed demands? If that was the case for the lower back, all those people would have bulletproof backs. They would just be in a position. And I also don't like this argument where it's mostly from physios, this kind of new wave thing where it's like, you're just making sure people are distracted till they recover. Like, what a fucking cop-out. Give me a fucking break. Like, there's clearly something you can do. If you believe that strength training incurs adaptions, if you believe that you can make positive adaptions of force and output, why can you not believe that there's a situation where you can reduce the pain from an injury or decrease the chance of happening again? Like, don't, it's such a cop-out, I feel like, where there's this kind of thing where it's like, you're just noceboing people or placeboing people, I suppose, in a positive direction to recovery,
Yeah.
which I think is also bullshit, where you're like washing your hands of it because you can't figure out the situation. When there's clearly some people who are exceptionally good, I'm not saying we're those people, but there's clearly people who are exceptionally good at helping people recover from injury. And then some people will throw out this rebuttal where it's like, oh, they're just returning to the mean. Like, that's just an average recovery time. And you're like, oh, so if I've had an injury for 5 years and after 2 weeks of a rehab program, it's suddenly better. He's saying that's just a spontaneous recovery. So I think anyone who's drastically confident, if there's anyone who feels like they've all the answers for this, then I definitely think they're full of bullshit, because there's very good arguments for both sides of this. So anyone who's like, oh, this is just fear-mongering or any nonsense, you're not putting context, and you're just letting someone who's popular and you're not popular influence some of that decision, which definitely goes on, which we were talking about earlier with some of the other coaches. But I think there's valid arguments for both sides, in my opinion, for this.
I just want to finish with 2 points here, right? The first thing is that all of this is grand in terms of injury prevention and in terms of the risk and whether there's a heightened risk with flexion, lessened risk with less flexion. That's okay until the point where performance comes up against this.
Yeah.
Because squatting with a flexed back or deadlifting with your back and you look like a fucking pissed off cat, both of those things are worse. And all of these arguments about anti-fragility and all these arguments about making adaptations, all of those things are grand, and the physios can argue about that all day long. Try and contract maximally when your back and neck are in a fully flexed position, and one thing will happen: you'll get neurological inhibition and you won't be able to do it. So yeah, if you want to be doing it and you don't really care about performance, that's all okay. If you want to go and scrummage against a tight head, you want to be scrummaging against a tight head who's really tight in the hips and their lower back is all bent and they can't produce force for shit because they're in a really bad position. All of it goes out the window when performance comes into it. And that is plain and simple. Performance is the ultimate marker for us. And I think that's probably why we don't give such cut and dry things on it as well, is because in performance realms, there is no question mark. There is absolutely zero question over what's better. The second thing, and this is the last thing I will say, this natural adaptation thing that people talk about really pisses me off at certain points. Mm-hmm. If I want to punch Owen as hard as I possibly can in the face,
oh dear,
this wrist position is going to be pretty good, right? Mm-hmm. No matter how much I punch Owen in the face like this, my body isn't really ever going to want to naturally adapt to this, right? So I've a bone spur out the back of my wrist here from catching a bar in the incorrect position for years and years in the overhead and the snatch. That's how my body adapted, right?
Oh my.
It grew 2 extra little bone spurs out the back of these 2 carpals. That is not a positive adaptation. It's an adaptation, but it doesn't make me better, and it doesn't make the pain go away. It can't really hold a bar in a snatch position now. But that's what the adaptation is, those 2 bone spurs. It's not, your body will adapt, but your body's not some sort of magic thing that's going to always adapt you in the correct position. In the same way where if you see a dog walking down the road that got hit by a car 15 years ago, that dog will limp and hobble and its hips will be in a weird position. The adaptation that your body imposes after these injuries or after these negative influences for so long, just because your body does them and because it's this natural adaptation that occurs, doesn't for 1 second mean that it's going to be a good thing.
That's a great point. You should have a YouTube.
Right.
Hey lads, do you want to answer questions or do you?
Let's do one more.
Get it. Sorry, we got the sidetrack. There's a lot of great questions.
Yes, I want to answer this one. David Toulis.
Oh my God, there's so many good questions I have to get to.
As the qualified ergonomics assessor and VDU workstation unit assessor in the room, there are some things people should do for people who are stuck at a desk all day. The first thing is, if you're in the EU, you should be getting your visual display unit workstation assessment done and making sure your screens are set up, your chair is set up, your desk is set up. If you're not in the EU, then you're unlucky, but you should go and get that work set up done correctly. That's the kind of baseline thing. A few major things here. The first thing is just move around as much as possible. I know there's all these things like your best position is your next position, but in very, very basic and simple terms, try and move yourself around as much as you possibly can. If you can get a chair that will go up high to like a perching position and you can do some of your calls in that perch position, great. Sit, stand, desk, phenomenal, but you have to be moving it around. Just standing isn't the solution. Just sitting in a back care chair isn't a solution. Moving around a lot as much as you possibly can is the solution. I'd also go so far as to say, if you can walk around the place for 15 or 20 minutes on your lunch break, or do that twice per day, even better. Just getting some motion in there will help a huge amount with that. The last thing I'll say on this is 3 stretches you're going to do. So 3 stretches, you'll do them every single day. Ideally, do them when you come into the office and before you leave the office in the evening. The first one is a couch stretch, so you can do this on your chair. Look up Kelly Starrett couch stretch. If you're going to do it in the gym, do a band distracted couch stretch to kind of blow it up a little bit more. The second thing I'd like you to do is a pigeon stretch on a box or a pigeon stretch on your desk. Basically getting that foot up in front of you like this, 90 degrees. Open up that hip, get extra external rotation into your hip will help a lot. And then some sort of posterior chain stretching. Smash your hammies, smash your calves, smash your lower back, smash your glutes. Whatever it is, find a good stretch for your posterior chain. And they're the 3 things I would be doing.
Okay, I have 3.
3?
Yeah.
Holy moly.
4, sorry.
4.
Sorry, I'm not picking these based off of preference of questions. I'm just picking these off of...
Right.
Okay, there's some good questions. Hang on a second. Just wait a second now. Just don't you talk for
You've no homes to go to.
Don't you talk for a second. Favorite doctors? Okay, 4. I'm going to start. Wait a second now. Hold on. Again, this is not an attack on anyone's question if you get skipped here, but there's just 4 specifically I want to talk about. So I'll take this one. I'm a part of there. Is there any way to apply a weightlifting style squat to a low bar squat, specifically having an upright position? Been watching you guys' videos lately, been very helpful. Is there any way to apply a weightlifting style squat to a low bar? So I'm not sure if you specifically mean, do you mean use your weightlifting style squat to help your low bar, or is there a way of squatting low bar with kind of a high bar style? There's yes to both of those questions. I'll answer the programming one first. Our favorite method of improving the low bar squat, and it is so reliable, it's incredibly beneficial, and we see this work literally thousands of times now, so we're confident that this method works really well. I'm not saying there's other methods that don't work, but this particular method we found works really well, and we've got it refined incredibly productively. The high bar full range of motion squat with a consistent back angle that allows you to get pretty deep will help both your low bar squat and your deadlifts really well. It's very useful because the top end weights are restricted compared to your low bar squat, so you can get more volume in without the risk of that elbow, wrist, knee, back, hip pain that you might get from low bar squatting. So you can get a ton of volume in with more consistent technique. You're taking your range of your muscles through a good range of motion. So it allows you to train your legs in a position where they're very resilient. They can produce a lot of force over for a full range of motion if you can get to those deep squats. And this transfer then helps your leg drive from the floor in the deadlift, and then helps obviously your squatting strength in the low bar squat. So this transfer of getting a bigger weightlifting style squat first helps your low bar really well. Now, if you mean the second fashion, can you do a low bar style squat with high bar positions? Yes, we actually talk about this a ton. This is usually the default way we coach people to do the low bar squat, is we teach them to essentially set up the low bar in the position that feels the most comfortable for you. Start the rep in a position that allows you to maintain this low bar position. And then we almost exclusively focus on forward knee drive and the hips going back at the same time to get to that parallel position. This works really well because the 99.9% of the people that we interact with low bar squatting aren't massive human beings. So sometimes, and it's a valid squat method, we just rarely use it, is that we can spread the floor, open up our knees as we squat down and sit our hips back to get parallel. We find that this gets very hard to progress meaningfully because you're kind of, I don't want to call it technical maxing, but you kind of are. And we find that there's more consistent, repeatable ways of improving the style of low bar squat that we teach. Again, just that's the way we do it, and we find it very reproducible. So you can focus essentially on low bar squat, you're keeping a consistent back angle, and then you squat down, driving the knees forward. But then we need to adjust hip position, we need to adjust foot position, toe position to allow us to get to that parallel or competition depth. Because what could easily happen here is we could take the low bar position and then we'll take a really narrow stance, and then it'll be really hard to get to an apparent high bar position, or sorry, get to an apparent competition depth with this low bar position, because your hips will stay, your ass will get stacked on top of your calves, and then your hip line or whatever the measurement is in terms of your competition depth in competition or in parts of competition won't be counted. So you need to make sure that the stance we're using allows for that. So generally a slightly wider stance. If you go back a couple of months ago, did a video on one of our lifters who squatted 335 in competition, a low bar, at like 100 odd kilos body weight. And we go through some of that method specifically there. So if you've been watching them lately, you probably have missed that. So you'll go back a couple of weeks.
We have a super like here.
What's the question?
5 from the bottom, nothing but tide.
Oh, this doesn't show the super questions actually.
Okay. Nothing but tide says, do you think the idea that a Zercher squat is good for front carries is flawed? What would be some good ways I could program front carries? So it's certainly not flawed in any way. Zercher squats would be very good for benefiting your front carries. The issue we have with the Zercher lifts is that they're terrible for the lifts themselves. So a Zercher squat isn't great for getting a bigger squat. And if we say getting a bigger squat is one of the most important things in terms of being able to develop a lot of force, being able to be powerful as much as you possibly can, the Zercher squat isn't the best way of getting there. Is the Zercher squat a good way of practicing carrying something out in front of you? Absolutely it is. It's really useful for things like that because it's specifically practicing that thing, but it's not the best way of training the accolades you want to train with a squat, is what I'd say to that. In terms of your question of what would be the best way I could program front carries, you program front carries very, very simply. You find a weight that you can do effectively for a distance, let's say 20 meters of a front carry. You find a weight, whatever that weight's going to be. Then slowly over time, you build the amount of volume you can do with that weight. Then let's say after 4 weeks of building the total distance you're doing with that, then you're going to drop that distance back down to the original distance, increase the weight by 5 kilos, 10 kilos, whatever it is, whatever your next sandbag is. And then you go through that same progression of distance again. I just have one more.
No, you don't. I have another one for you. Hang on.
This is the next one after that.
Damn, there's too many questions I want to answer, but I'll get to the one I had planned. Evan said he's gone running horse through.
Nice.
Well done. Where is it now? This is for you. Oh, yeah. I'm currently 88 kg and want to attempt the same day challenge. 200 kilo back squat, sub 20-minute 5K. Is it a bad idea to try and drop body weight down to 80 kilos before making the actual attempt? Back squats 190, 5K is 27 minutes at the moment.
So a couple of things here. 27 minutes to 20 minutes on a 5K is a big distance to make up. Certainly doable.
Yeah.
Certainly doable, particularly if you're not doing a lot of running at the moment. It's definitely a doable thing, and dropping 8 kilos in body weight will be super beneficial to that. My worry there is, or my main concern for you would be the 190 back squat, and now you're going to attempt 10 kilos heavier than that while being 8 kilos lighter.
8 is a lot.
8 is, it's 10% of your body weight.
I was trying to say, as a percentage, it's big.
It's, I would be saying...
It's not needed?
No. I would literally say, train your ass off right now, get your 5K runs done, get your back squat to 205, 210, somewhere around that. I would say you're comfortably hitting 210 would be a really good place to do it. And then you can start playing around with those things. But right now, I'd start training your ass off at 88 kilos. You've a lot of room to make up for in the back or in the 5K. You're taking more than a minute off per kilometer there. So I would say start the running block, start the squatting block, get that back squat to 205 to 210, somewhere around there while you're still training. And then you can make those manipulations. If you need to drop another minute or two off that 5K time, drop a couple of kilos of body weight. And then that you'll have that kind of higher ceiling with the back squat that you can kind of fall back on to 200 kilos. But I certainly wouldn't be dropping the 80 kilos right now because a 10% drop in body weight trying to maintain that squat,
No, increase the squat.
or sorry, increase the squat is very large.
Where am I going there? How to write a 4 to 5 week hypertrophy block and 4 to 5 week strength block for powerlifting for oneself. Is powerlifting programming manual book by Chad Wesley Smith good for learning programming? Second question is I've never read the book, so I can't answer. From what I remember, Chad, when he used to put out a lot of stuff, had good things. So I imagine it's worth a read. It's very rare that reading a book is a negative outcome. It might be in the short term, you might do some things wrong, but it'll probably benefit you in the long run. So I'd say there's a good chance reading that is a good idea. Now, how to write a 4 to 5 week hypertrophy block and 4 to 5 week strength block for powerlifting. You've started off in a great position where you've already kind of segmented that. Now, the thing here is when we say blocks, the problem is the suggestion or the thought process that pops in the head is a very distinct hypertrophy block over strength training block begins, when in reality it's hypertrophy emphasis, but basically the same movements. Finishes, it's like a spectrum moving over into that strength training block. So it's very, very smooth to transition. Technically, you could look at, for example, our row to near squat program is kind of segmented into 2 blocks like that, if you wanted to think about it that way, where the first 4 weeks, we're pushing that bit of volume first, then we regress a little bit and push the strength in at the end. So pick movements that are the strength movements that you want to improve. So you said powerlifting, so squat, bench, and deadlift. So they're the movements you want to peak at the end of your strength. So pick the numbers you think you can hit, not want to hit. Think that the movements, the numbers that you want to hit at the end of the strength phase, so the end of this whole training block, this whole 8 to 10 week block or 12 weeks. So let's say it's 5, 10 kilos on each lift. That's the hope or the destination you want to get to, reasonable progression. Write those down at the end of your block. Then work back on what you think you need to hit to facilitate those. So if you want to do, your current squat is 150 kilos, you want to squat 160 kilos, you probably need to hit 150 kilos for a double or a triple or 2 doubles, something like that. You need to learn this yourself. I can't give you all the answers, just some guy with a mustache, great name though. And then you regress back from that and you think, okay, what do I need to facilitate that 150 kilos for a triple, say? You're like, okay, I probably need 140 kilos for 3 sets of 3 or 4 sets of 3. And then you work further back there until you get to a reasonable starting point for your strength block. And then you look at your hypertrophy block and you think, right, I'm probably going to keep this higher volume. Technically, could I facilitate hypertrophy with heavy sets of 3? Yeah, you could. But would it be probably more appropriate to stay away from those very heavy weights for a while and get some more work capacity and get a bit more skill practice with higher volume? So that then lends itself to thinking, okay, we're going to start the hypertrophy block or the hypertrophy emphasis with higher volume work. So we're going to do our 10s. So then you think, okay, where do I want to end up at the end of that hypertrophy block? And you think maybe a maximal set of 10, maybe a top set of 8, maybe it's a top 3 by 10, for example. And then you work back from there. And then you look at, okay, where would it make sense to end my hypertrophy block and begin my powerlifting block with those numbers? Because we probably don't want to start, we don't want to finish our hypertrophy block with a 20 rep max if it's a short time frame into our strength block is a short time frame. So we don't want to spend 4 weeks and finish up at a 20 rep max and then go straight into our 5s on our strength block. So we kind of, in our opinion, you want those seamless transitions. So this starts to piece itself out into things that make sense. And then you do the same thing or similar with your assistance exercise, but you make sure that they're not interfering with your main exercises too much. It might make sense to push them harder in your hypertrophy phase, but not quite so hard then, but still push them in your strength training phase. Right.
Mr. Steele,
Way hand,
the last one. It's not the last question, but it's 3 or 4 from the bottom. Mr. Steele. There we go.
This one?
Yeah. Can I benefit from doing a 6-day week program over 8 or 9 days, along with one day of football, training, or game? Split would be acceleration, upper, lower, GA masters once a week. Right. I'll answer this in general and then we'll just talk about your specific case. A 6-day week program over 8 or 9 days is okay. You're probably better off going with something like a 3 or 4 day per week program, and just doing that weekly would be a lot better. What happens is, basically when you have a 6-day per week program, imagine you've 6 different primary exercises. Maybe that'll actually be 4 because you'll probably double up on one of them or 2 of them. But generally speaking, 6 days per week, it's a lot of different stuff happening in those sessions. You're better off with a 3 or 4 day per week program and then making that fit into your week rather than trying to get that to fit in. In terms of your specific case, where it's an acceleration session, an upper session, a lower session, an upper session, a lower session, and then either GA match or training, I'm going to say it flat across the board now. Doing upper and lower days as an athlete is not it. Athletes should not be doing upper lower splits. Athletes should not be doing bodybuilding style splits unless in a very specific hypertrophy period of training. And the upper lower split here will undoubtedly hold you back majorly in your overall athletic development. So why do we say this? Well, firstly, unless it's purely training for hypertrophy, which is okay if you do these kind of splits, unless you're doing that, you're going to limit the absolute strength you can gain, because what happens when we do an upper split, I smash my upper body or I smash 2 or 3 main areas of my upper body. I'm not really going to maximize the absolute force I'm producing in any of those lifts, the speed the barbell is moving at, the rate of force development in any of those pieces. Also, the upper and lower splits get us to the point where you massively fatigue and break down 1 or 2 areas of the body. Then we're hoping that in 2 days' time, that's kind of recovered to the point whereby we can go again. And that's why no athlete should be doing upper and lower splits. Athletes should be training as effectively as they possibly can. In the small amount of time they have in the gym, they need to be efficient. What does this mean? This means picking 2, 3, or 4 exercises that over the course of the week you're going to smash and give your all to doing. They become your primary movers each week. When we're doing those primary movements, we make sure we're fresh, make sure we're not carrying any DOMs in that's going to affect that movement negatively, and we make sure we have enough work capacity to get those pieces done. So I'm correctly fueled, I've fully recovered, I'm going to be able to go and do my back squats or my push presses or whatever that is. The upper and lower splits and those kind of buys and tries, chest and back, whatever the split is, that's really for bodybuilders. And even if you're just playing GA at a master's level or at a kind of not competitive level, you shouldn't be training like that.
Okay, thank you for all your questions. Very sorry we didn't get the other ones. There's a lot of good questions there, but we have other work to do today. So thank you for everyone's questions. And we'll see you again, usually Fridays on the live streams. If it's not Friday, it's not happening. But if it is happening, it's on a Friday. So at least you know. Usually in the afternoon time, most of the time. So thank you for everyone's questions. And have a great weekend. It's finally sunshine. First time in 6 months there's sunshine here in Ireland. So it's really
Got a farm